This video is not intended for children under the age of 13. You've been warned. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the Star Wars Marathon. Yeah, it's been a little while since I posted one of these and I will have them all out. My original plan was to have these all out before I saw Rise of Skywalker, but I don't think that's going to happen now. But I will review all these movies in depth as I am rewatching them. I'm a bit behind, but here we go. Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So, I have a bit of a different watch history with this one than I do with some of the other Star Wars movies. Like I always said, I grew up with the original trilogy, first saw it when I was about 8 and loved it, but was scared of a lot of things in the original movie. I remember being quite scared of the garbage chute scene especially. Now, I never really watched the original trilogy again, even though I wanted to because I was scared. And then, when I was older, I ended up watching the original trilogy and falling in love with it when I was 12. So, I did that. I remember falling in love with it when I was 12, and I had the original trilogy on VHS. I watched them all the time. This was before Force Awakens was out in any of the new movies. So, I will say now that I remember watching The Phantom Menace, not really liking it. We got that out of the library because I would watch the original trilogy on VHS all the time. I watched The Phantom Menace, I didn't really like it. I didn't watch Clones, didn't watch Sith. Then I saw Force Awakens in the theater and loved it. And then at some point in early 2016, when my mother was going through some medical stuff and everything was kind of in turmoil, I borrowed my cousin's copies of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And we watched them. And, that was the first time I ever saw Revenge of the Sith. Now, Attack of the Clones I discussed in the last video, of course, has numerous issues. I did enjoy that film more than I expected to after Phantom Menace. Revenge of the Sith I did not enjoy. I thought this movie was way too dark and way too depressing. I also remember closing my eyes for parts of the scenes where Anakin, you know, killed younglings where there were dead bodies, and the part where he was cut in half. Now, I didn't actually watch any of that because my mother told me to close my eyes. She said it would be too intense for me. I was coming off a time, I was very scared of movies as a kid. I had bad anxiety and I was very scared of movies, so I decided not to watch it. The movie was really, really depressing to me when I first saw it because I was going through a really hard time in my personal life. There was a lot of stuff going on. I remember being really anxious halfway through. I think it was the part where Anakin and Padme were talking just at one point, and there was a lot of tension, and I just felt really anxious. The movie did not leave me feeling good. I did think some parts were really cool, though. I didn't really get to watch the final battle in its entirety, like I said, because I was a scaredy cat, but I thought the scene with Obi-Wan and General Grievous was really cool. I just remember that scene with, you know, Obi-Wan, and the lizard thing in General Grievous. Now, getting into the film itself, at the time, I just didn't really like it. I thought it was really intense. There were parts of it that I liked. I thought it connected to the original trilogy really well, but at the time, I felt it was too intense and dark. But almost 4 years later, watching this movie again, I have watched it, I think, one other time, making it probably my least watched Star Wars movie with the exception of Solo. But I will say right here that revisiting this film almost 4 years later, here is my review of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. So the plot takes place a couple years after Attack of the Clones. They're in the middle of a war, the Clone War. Anakin and Obi-Wan are in a space battle piloting a ship. They show up on this big ship, and Count Dooku is there, along with General Grievous, who is a robot with a cough that steals lightsabers off Jedi and wields multiple lightsabers in his arms. Count Dooku is there, and so is Palpatine. They go into a room, a confrontation room. Obi-Wan is knocked out, and Palpatine tells Anakin to kill Count Dooku when he's defenseless, which is not the Jedi way. Anakin does it, he saves Obi-Wan, and R2-D2 is also there, and they get out. Meanwhile, Padme is back on Coruscant, and she tells Anakin that she's pregnant. He was worried about it, and starts having nightmares that she is going to die in childbirth. Now he goes to Yoda to ask for advice, but he can't tell Yoda that he's talking about Padme because he's secretly married to her and isn't supposed to be married to Padme. Now, Anakin wants a place in the Jedi Council, and Palpatine / Sidious is trying to take over now that Dooku is dead. Grievous is doing a thing. So they end up trying to make Anakin a spy for them, because the Jedi Council does not trust Palpatine. They mistrust him because he's a politician. Anakin gets really close to Palpatine and starts, doubting the Jedi Council. He starts being afraid because he's having dreams of Padme dying in childbirth, which is, and last time he had nightmares was about his mother, and he is afraid. So he ends up talking to Palpatine. Palpatine tells Anakin this story about this Sith, Darth Plagueis, who was able to conquer death. And Anakin wants this ability. Now, the Council still doesn't trust Palpatine, and they want to trust Anakin. Obi-Wan's here, and Obi-Wan wants to trust Anakin, but he's scared too. Now, Obi-Wan tells Anakin that he'll be a master soon enough. They put Anakin on the Jedi Council, but he's not a master, and he's very mad about this. He's jealous, and he wants to be on the Council. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, goes to this planet to fight with Grievous. He ends up doing this whole chase. Grievous is there, and Obi-Wan gets chased by Grievous and ends up killing him with a blaster, which is very uncivilized, as he says. So Anakin gets into this confrontation. He happens to be there with Palpatine because the Jedi Council shows up to arrest Palpatine with Mace Windu, and a few other Jedi show up to arrest him. Now, Palpatine does not like this, and he starts killing them. He gets out his lightsaber, they realize he's a Sith, they realize he's Sidious, and he starts killing them. The Jedi. Now, Mace Windu gets into a fight with Palpatine. Anakin's just kind of standing there. They get into a fight, and Palpatine starts using Force Lightning on Mace Windu. Mace Windu fires it back at him with his lightsaber, and Palpatine's face becomes disfigured. Then Mace Windu gets yeeted out a window. Then Anakin turns evil. He gets this glint in his eyes, and he pledges allegiance to Palpatine because he thinks Palpatine is the only one who can help him save Padme. Now, Palpatine gives him the nickname Darth Vader. Meanwhile, there's all this stuff going on, and there's clone troops everywhere. There's some stuff going on the Wookiee planet Kashyyyk, and at the end of the day, none of that's really all that important, because then Palpatine says to execute Order 66. The clone troopers that were designed for the Republic are supposed to answer to Palpatine. So that he tells the clone troopers to go against the Jedi. They start killing Jedi. All the Jedi start being killed, and then Palpatine sends Anakin into the temple to kill the younglings. Meanwhile, Yoda feels a great disturbance in the Force and is really sad. Obi-Wan doesn't know what the hell's going on. He starts freaking out. He ends up meeting up with Organa, and they're talking, and then Obi-Wan doesn't realize at first that Anakin's doing this. He goes to visit Padme, and they kind of figure out what's going on. She tells him she's pregnant, and she says Anakin's father, and there's that. So then Anakin says he doesn't want to kill, Obi-Wan says he doesn't want to kill Anakin because he is like his brother, but they're saying he's dangerous and he has to kill Anakin. So he goes in to this planet, this lava planet Mustafar. He follows Anakin there. Anakin's there. He stows away in Padme's ship. Padme tries to talk him into turning back to the good side. He force chokes her, almost killing her. Then she ends up going back on the ship. Obi-Wan shows up and starts fighting Anakin. They fight for a while, and then meanwhile, Yoda is fighting Palpatine in a Senate room after also Palpatine declared the creation of the first Galactic Empire. And Padme was just sitting there, and Jar Jar was just sitting there, so that happened. Padme is responsible, but no. But Palpatine declared an empire. Now he's fighting Yoda in this room. Meanwhile, while we're back on the planet, Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting. They end up fighting. They have this. Obi-Wan's really upset. He ends up beating Anakin in a duel. He cuts off Anakin's legs, leaves him burning in the lava, starts talking about how much he let everyone down by killing all the Jedi. Now, Anakin is left there to die. Obi-Wan gets off the planet with Padme. Then Palpatine shows up to resurrect or save Darth Vader / Anakin, who is now, you know, burned off. Now, Palpatine takes Vader away and fixes him up. They think he's dying, but he resurrects him into Darth Vader. He starts breathing, and meanwhile, Padme is dying in childbirth, just as he had predicted, even though he tried his best, he turned evil and all that. He wasn't able to save her. Obi-Wan's there, and Padme gives birth to twins, Luke and Leia. And then he decides to take the children into hiding. Organa takes Leia, and Obi-Wan takes Luke to his aunt and uncle's house on Tatooine. And that's about it. They're starting to build the Death Star, and Anakin yells, "No!" And that's about it. And then Padme has a funeral, and everything is just fine, except it's not. Obi-Wan stays on Tatooine to watch over the boy. Obi-Wan goes into hiding. Yoda goes into hiding on Dagobah because he got beat in this lightsaber duel, by the way. Yeah, so pretty much everything is set up for the original trilogy right here in this ending. So, overall, this plot was, well, at least a good bit less convoluted than the last two. Again, the plot of Phantom Menace got way less done and was way more convoluted. Overall, this is actually a surprisingly straightforward plot for a Star Wars prequel. Anakin turns evil, and basically this movie is the movie that sets up the original trilogy. Now, I find it really unfortunate that the first two movies didn't really do much to set up the original trilogy. The second one, a little bit. You had the Imperial March, you had the Clone Troopers, you had some things that were being set up there, but with the Phantom Menace, that didn't really establish anything, so that's something that really bothered me. I did feel like they had to kind of rush this and make the last movie work to do this. Now, I will say about this movie that the effects are absolutely phenomenal, as always, but this is the best CGI we've seen up to this point. The entire sequence on Mustafar with the lava is absolutely amazing. The choreography is amazing. The lightsaber dueling was all done in real time. Choreography is amazing, and I will say that music is great as always. There is some reused music again, but I definitely think this soundtrack is more on par with Phantom Menace, if not better. Definitely better than the Attack of the Clones soundtrack. And the theme when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting is really very great. Chewbacca makes a cameo, and overall it's pretty decent. Now, getting into the overall tone of this film, is a very dark and much more serious tone. There isn't really any humor or sort of anything to balance it out. Empire Strikes Back was previously the darkest film in the series. This film surpassed this. This was actually the first PG-13 Star Wars film, believe it or not. Now, Empire Strikes Back is a very dark film in lots of ways, but it has a lot of funny jokes and running gags. Now we have Revenge of the Sith, which doesn't really have any of that. There isn't, like, any humor. There's a few moments, you know, with Obi-Wan where you're like, that's a nice jab at the original trilogy or their blaster. There's a few moments of something that can be considered funny, but overall it's definitely a very more serious tone. I didn't mind this at all, really. I thought it, was tonally appropriate for what we're talking about here, which is Anakin turning to the dark side. Now, I will say that one of my big issues was that I thought the first two films were not tonally appropriate. One of the issues I had was that the first film was, it's okay to be jovial, be a kid, but there was a weird jump in tone from 2 to 3. Yeah, 2 started developing some darker elements with Anakin, being angry and killing the Sand People, but at the end of the day, it wasn't really anything that was super developed, and the overall tone of the film, while darker than the first one, still had this very bright, colorful thing going on. They're fighting on Geonosis and all that. It looks cool, and I'm not trying to say it's badly done, but it doesn't really feel like Star Wars. Everything is relatively clean and shiny. The Capitol, the Senate, all that is all right. Didn't really bother me, but it just doesn't really feel like Star Wars aesthetic. It feels like a bunch of colors and just like very vibrant, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but Star Wars to me was always old, rusty, dark, not vibrant at all. You do have some vibrant worlds, but it was very, very vibrant. in the first two films, which I just thought was kind of off base. Same thing with the characters in the story, just felt more lighthearted, especially Phantom Menace, I think, was really designed as a kid's film. Now, going into this, I will say that there is a strong pivot in the tone of this film. This film does a 180 on the tone. It takes the, you know, the lighter the tone, the way it's filmed, everything. It throws you into space battles, dark skies, ships with geometrical windows, worlds that are, you know, not super vibrant. And when it is vibrant, it's very dramatic, and it's on an epic scale. You've got lava. It's on an epic scale. It's great. Now, I will just say that everything about this movie is on a big epic scale. I just think that's one of the best things that they did, is make it feel significant. Now, again, you're thrown into these very familiar set pieces even right at the beginning when you're on the ship. It's very much more mechanical and a lot less vibrant and natural settings than the first films. You have everything mechanical. You have the scene on the ship with Palpatine, you know, Anakin and Dooku, which is very reminiscent of the scene in Return of the Jedi. Again, definitely very sharp tonal shift, I would say, for the better, but it still kind of threw me for a loop. I was getting some whiplash from this, just watching Attack of the Clones and then watching Revenge of the Sith right after. I was getting some whiplash. Now, again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's more a fault of the first two movies for not establishing a tone that fit. It was too much of a pivot. Lucas figured out what he was doing wrong and fixed it, but he fixed it too abruptly. He should have figured out what he was doing wrong about 1.5 movies prior. Now, going into the stuff that, you know, is more controversial is stuff like, you know, the acting and the script, all that. So, I thought the acting was pretty good. Again, we had, you know, Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan, great lead there. We had, lots of good actors in this. You had, obviously, Samuel L. Jackson again. You had Christopher Lee. You had Ian McDiarmid. Lots of good actors. And, of course, you had, you know, Frank Oz doing the voice for Yoda. Yoda is now CGI, and very expressive, might I add. Now, we have our two leads, which were pretty bad in the last film, Anakin and Padme. I thought that they definitely improved, although Padme didn't really have much to do, which is an issue I'll get to. She was fine, I guess. Hayden Christensen definitely playing into the more angrier, darker side is definitely better than trying to play into his romantic side. I can definitely say that. I did not like it when he was trying to be romantic. That just came off as really stiff and awkward to me. Definitely not the worst thing ever. I think his performance is all right. Again, he's pretty like stiff, but he can pull off anger at least, which is a better mood to fit this film. So at least that kind of works. The script itself was, I wouldn't say it's remarkable. There were some really good lines in the script that I do remember. And the one line that Padme said, "This is how democracy This is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause." That's a good line. And some of the parts where Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting, some of the things that Ewan McGregor says, I'll get into that. The lines themselves aren't great, but the way they're delivered is just really good. The performance is great, like I said. There are some kind of questionable lines, I guess, that get memed. You have, of course, the high ground, which was just a pointless line. It doesn't really bother me at all. I just think it's kind of funny. I guess it could break the mood of the scene if you're into that. But overall, again, Star Wars has never been known for great scripts, but this is one of the, you know, more decent ones, I guess. Again, the story itself is honestly pretty straightforward compared to the first two, way less convoluted. Now, getting into the characters themselves and the characterization and development of these characters. So there was good and bad. Again, we had definite improvements, I guess, with Anakin. Obviously, he turns evil, but I think his character is more fleshed out than in the last movie, where it was just this romantic, whiny kid, kind of. His character is definitely more fleshed out in this movie, and he has motivations for turning evil, which I thought was pretty well done, if not a little bit rushed. Again, that was kind of the fault of the other two movies being, you know, the way they were. Now, you know, I really thought it was great to see Palpatine fully develop into the Emperor. That was a pretty great thing. Mace Windu is kind of a pushover in this film. Actually, most of the Jedi in this film are kind of pushovers. This was something that really bothered me, is that the Jedi are just defeated really easily. It just doesn't feel like all the Jedi would go down that quickly by a bunch of clones and an angry, unstable teenager. It just doesn't feel realistic to me, but I don't know. The Jedi in this entire prequel trilogy have been pretty stupid. Jedi Council sucks. So, again, going back into this, I have nothing else to really say other than that the Jedi Council sucks. But the Jedi are pushovers. But I will say it's an extremely emotionally effective scene when Order 66 is executed. But going back to the main characters, we have Obi-Wan, who, you know, is realizing his kind of his flaws as a mentor. He's upset at what he's done. He feels like he's, you know, failed at Anakin almost. And it's pretty sad, actually. Again, the performance is really good. Ewan McGregor is great in the role. And again, I thought that, you know, seeing Anakin develop into Vader, seeing Palpatine develop into the Emperor, a lot of this was really well done. And then there's Padme, who just kind of doesn't exist. Now, Padme's main role is to stay at home, sit pretty, and be pregnant for 9 months. Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but she doesn't put up much of a fight in any scenario. She's lost her badass rebellious streak. She could be severely depressed, which is the vibe I get, but it still doesn't really work for me. I just don't like how little she has to do and how I felt her feisty character was completely ruined. At the end of the movie, she dies in childbirth. Supposedly, she lost the will to live, which is kind of a weirdly dramatic thing, this whole medical bullshit. I wouldn't put it past to believe that Vader killed her by accident. That's literally what Palpatine says, so it would make more sense that way. I don't believe she actually died of a broken heart, but it is pretty cringy regardless. There's also a minor continuity error with that Leia said she remembered her mother returned to the Jedi, which makes me wonder if she had Force image memories in her head somehow. I don't really know how that works, but if that was like something that was implanted in her brain by the Force. Like, Luke never went to Dagobah, and he's like, there's something familiar about this place, but I digress. So, again, I thought the characterization overall was pretty good, but then we had Padme, which was a disaster. Yoda's about the same, and those are really all the major characters. Again, Mace Windu and all the Jedi are kind of pushovers in this. So, there really isn't too much else to say this. Now, in terms of main issues I had of the film, other than Padme, a lot of them just kind of stemmed from the first two films, because the first two films felt an awkward foundation. Again, the acting definitely could have been better. I think Hayden Christensen was still not great casting for Anakin, but the fact that they let him play into his angry side and not his romantic James Dean side definitely helped. So there's that. I definitely think it was better, but still, you know, not the best acting on the planet. The script was, again, fine in my opinion. It didn't really stick out to me as being bad the way Episode 2 script did. I don't understand why Episode 2 script was so much worse than the others. I would lead me to believe that George Lucas sucks at writing romantic dialogue specifically. He did say he wasn't good at writing dialogue, which there are bad lines in the other movies, but again, what the hell, Lucas? How did that happen in Episode 2? It's just the worst script I've ever seen. Anyway, getting back to this, I thought it was pretty good overall. I didn't really think any of the scenes were terrible. I dragged a bit in the middle, and there was a part toward the end where, you know, Padme shows up to try to convince him, and she's like, Annie, you're breaking my heart. That was pretty cringy. But overall, I didn't think there were too many bad scenes. I liked the ending. I thought it wrapped everything up pretty solid. And again, there was some stuff with Anakin that felt really abrupt. Like, toward the middle of the movie, he's just chilling there, and Mace Windu gets killed, and then he's just like, and then Palpatine's just like, hey, want to join me? He's like, sure. It just felt really abrupt to me, but he did have some foundation of, you know, Darth Plagueis and all that stuff that Palpatine had told him. Palpatine is quite the presence in this film, but again, biggest downside character-wise is definitely Padme in this. Now, and also Jar Jar is here, but he isn't, no one cares. He's even less of a presence in this movie. Now, going on to, you know, the good stuff, the standout scenes, the stuff that we're right home about. I want to say that the opening sequence to this film is really good. I love the whole thing with when they're on the ship, when they're, you know, when Anakin's fighting Dooku, you've got the whole ship. You've got R2-D2 there doing stuff that I did not know R2-D2 was capable of. Why didn't he use this flying and all these abilities in the original trilogy? I don't understand. Anyway, But you have all this stuff. Also, the droid's memories were wiped. I should mention that. But at the end of this movie, but you have all this stuff happening that doesn't really make sense. But okay, with R2-D2, but it's still cool nonetheless. Again, the opening sequence is really fun, and I think the ending, or the third act of this film, is really great, with the exception of the scene I mentioned earlier with Padme. I really, really love the battle. This is the most well-choreographed lightsaber fight I've ever seen. I would say that, to me, that it's not my favorite lightsaber battle in the series. I would say both Luke versus Vader battles beat it in terms of emotional scope for me, but in terms of actual scope, epicness, the way it looks, this is by far the best. Now, it is a bit long, but it's still really cool. Now, I have one thing I want to say. Again, the Jedi are pushovers, and that's one of my problems with this movie. I just cannot believe that the entire Jedi Order was wiped out that easily by a bunch of clone troopers and a kid. I just can't believe that. But I digress. Getting back to what I think is good, the scene is really well shot. It's really emotionally scoped. The score's good. The Order 66 scene is actually really solid. Now, again, one of the last standouts for me, was a specific part, when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting, and, Obi-Wan cuts off Anakin's legs, and he's standing, above him. I don't want to, say the high ground, because that's a meme, but at this point, but, he starts saying all this stuff, you were my brother, Anakin, and I failed you, and all this stuff, and again, the performance is fantastic right there. Ewan McGregor does a fantastic job with this scene. I just think it really shows Obi-Wan's, emotional struggle at this point, thinking he failed Anakin and seeing his pupil go bad and having to kill him, basically, even though he doesn't end up dying, but that's the point. Yeah, it's quite the complex thing right there. Obi-Wan is definitely my favorite character in this. Again, I really like seeing how his arc is just kind of, he took on this apprentice begrudgingly, and he ended up not knowing how to train him, and ended up paying for it. And again, really fantastic movie. Again, Palpatine / Sidious / the Emperor / whatever the hell you want to call him is a really great villain. I love him. He's just so well done. He really develops into the Emperor in this movie. Definitely not as loathsome as he is in Return of the Jedi, but he's getting there. And in the end, this movie is probably one of the most big films on the most epic scope to me. It's not super depressing. It does have a hopeful ending. There are parts that are kind of depressing. I was just in a bad phase of my life when I first watched it. Looking at this is by far the best of the prequel trilogy right here. And I have to say that this one has few things to complain about. There are still flaws, and I'll get into some of the other movies that I think have flaws in the series when I get into reviewing Star Wars some more. But for now, all I have to say is that this is, if you're going to watch any of the prequel films out of context, which you probably shouldn't watch this out of context, you should probably watch Attack of the Clones to know what's going on, but definitely watch this one. This is the best one. You should watch Attack of the Clones for context and skip Phantom Menace because it's pointless. But yeah, anyway guys, that was it for the video. I hope to see you all next time when I look at Solo, a Star Wars story, so stay tuned for that. I'll see you all next time, and may the Force be with you.